you very much. Yeah, and thanks everyone. Thank you very much for the invite. It's a real privilege to be able to, to be amongst you really speaking. So just so you know a little bit about me, it's kind of relevant to my presentation, but I started out my career as a support worker. I worked for quite a few years in loads of different settings, supporting people directly. I worked in residential care. I worked in NHS inpatient units. I've worked in home care services. I worked in supported living, supported accommodation. I've supported people in day services. I've also been a personal assistant. I've done loads of that kind of stuff right at the start of my career, and then as I moved through, I got into managing services and was obviously kind of responsible for the delivery of some of those things. I then moved out of that into for my sins into commissioning. I spent kind of 12 years working in local authority and NHS commissioning systems, and working alongside social workers and allied health professionals, really overseeing some of those services that I'd actually been working in. And I, when I first moved into commission, I thought to myself, this is the art of making something simple really complicated. And I still feel like that today, to be honest with you, and a lot of the conversations we have. Since that point, I kind of left local authority commissioning and set up self-directed futures, and we work around the country as part of the Centre for Welfare Reform, primarily trying to help shift personal budgets for, over to individuals to design their own support, basically. So I just wanted to share with you, so there's a few things I wanted to share today, just 3 lessons that I've learned about service-led commissioning as the first 3. So the first thing for me is not much has really changed in 20 years in terms of what's on offer to people through commission services. So I started off my career working in those settings. I can go into most local authorities in the country now and still find home care, day services, supported accommodation, residential care. And I know the mix of those has changed over time, but broadly speaking, not that much has changed in terms of those commissioned, how services have been commissioned. And I always think if you contrast that to other areas of life, for example, like a mobile phone 20 years ago to a mobile phone now, there's not been much real progress in those areas. So the other bit for me is, obviously, we've talked about some of this obviously already, support often set up around estimating the volume of support hours that people need. So in these services, people tend to get an allocation of hours, often linked to time and task stuff, but if you're lucky, occasionally to outcomes. There's a bit more of that these days, which is great. And then that gets locked into a contract for a person that could be 12 months, 24 months, whatever, in between kind of reviews. That for me just seems slightly ridiculous way of working, really, because I don't think any of us have the same day, let alone the same week, let alone the same year. So how we commission services in that way, for me, just seems really wasteful, not person-centered, and it's frankly outdated, I think, in terms of the practice. And it limits people. It limits people and their choice and control, and it limits them from doing things differently. So the third bit, I think, for me as well within this kind of model is, we talk about asset-based approaches within systems, within service land, but services are inherently done to people, not with them or by them. So, and we have kind of set up a whole ecosystem around contracting and procurement and perpetuating really what is quite a small, inflexible kind of service offer, really. And that goes around in circles. So, I've recommissioned that about 4 times in my time in local authority commissioning. The same service, slightly different, with slightly different branding, sort of slightly different outcomes, but effectively the same thing over and over again. And it continues to centralise control, obviously, with commissioners rather than with individuals. So just the other part for me is obviously just lessons. So last couple of years I've been lucky enough to be working in projects around community-led support, which is this concept of this radical idea of letting people themselves decide what they need locally, and then helping local organisations kind of match with people that have support needs and develop stuff. So the first lesson for me is, when people get a budget instead of a service and they're allowed to be creative in designing their own support, they often come up with solutions that aren't just services, which is kind of radical. Most innovations, I would say, in the last few years that I've seen have been driven by people themselves and their families using direct payments. I had a look at the TLAP rainbow, as I call it, on there, but it's the future models of community-centred support. I went on there earlier just to count up how many different types of organisation exist on that. And I came to about 36 different types of support organisations. And all of those, I would say, have organically grown from, not through commissioning, through people using their own budgets. But we've also got the Small Good Stuff Directory, which Community Catalysts have put together, which is hundreds of different types of small organisations around the country. So for me, that says innovation has happened in spite of commissioning. And I'm not saying that all commissioning is bad. I know there has been some innovative commissioning, but I think generally speaking, for me, that's a lesson. We still think 2/3 of people have a commission service nationally, roughly. but there's no reason why people can't have the same level of flexibility and creativeness as a direct payment. Local authorities and the NHS can offer individual service funds, what the NHS calls third-party budgets, which means that commission services can basically use an individual's funding more flexibly and adapt to day-to-day changes in how they want their support to be. From my perspective at the moment, not enough people are given this opportunity, but the number of areas offering these is growing fast, and it has become a right to request a third-party NHS budget for some people, which is fantastic. So, and also seeing as well for me, which is exciting, in some areas, I think commissioners are starting to see themselves, instead of being commissioners, as community shapers. And I think this is key to the future of commissioning, really. The role of commissioning should be around ensuring everybody has access to their personal budget, either through a direct payment, through an individual service fund, third-party budget, whatever it is. The control should be situated with the person. And then what gets developed and what the commissioner should be doing is really helping create a menu of lots of different options and lots of different supports for people locally, and listening to local people's voices about what they want in their area, and then making that happen, and helping to support that through funding, really. So that is happening, I would say, in lots of different areas and lots of different levels. But for me, we really can accelerate it if we get more people taking up individual service funds and more local authorities offering personal budgets to people. We will accelerate this and grow this kind of plethora of options for people local to them, which is absolutely critical. So just to give you 3 practical examples as well of where I've seen this, and I'm sure some of you guys will be aware of these, but Community Catalyst work in Somerset, I think gets heralded nationally as a great practice example, absolutely brilliant. 600 what they call micro enterprises in Somerset, working in local communities, providing support to people, and actually receiving a fair wage for their for the support they actually deliver, which is phenomenal. Bristol City Council doing some work with Power to Change, a program called Make It Local, which is literally about designing things locally and keeping the locus of control and power with individual citizens and local community organisations. And they're trying to develop, help broaden the spectrum of things that are on offer from the voluntary community social enterprise sector, using personal budgets really as a driver for that, which is fantastic. And obviously got to say Essex Council, we've been doing a bit of work with them, working with a range of different organisations. They're working towards basically a universal individual service funds offer, which is fantastic. They're doing it on a place basis at the moment, so people within a certain area can access an individual service fund, but the plan is then for that to become a universal offer in the next year or so across the whole of Essex, which would be fantastic as well. So, and they're probably the 3 main areas for me that stand out at the moment in terms of progressive commissioning stuff that I've been involved in. So yeah, and that's it. Sorry, that was a whistle stop tour. I was worried about going over. I normally go over my allocation of time, so that's me basically.